Well, good morning once again from Thursday. I guess it's a Thursday morning now, a week after Thanksgiving, holiday you're so fond of. And
Oh no, I am fond of eating. Thanksgiving was expensive though. We broke our oven, so
yeah.
Thanksgiving wasn't good. It broke the oven. That was expensive.
Well, yeah, that's no good. That's actually no good at all. So, well, I mean, we thought this Thursday, instead of having another guest, we'd do another tournament edition where, well, like the board says, what would you take? And so we'll each have a little idea of what we would take to bowl on this week's regional pattern, a 44-foot Hardwick pattern, supposedly 2.2 to 1. That's on a Brunswick machine, so by the time it's transferred to Kegel, it should be about 5.5 to 1.
Yeah, when I looked at the graph, it was about 3.2 to 1.
3.2, okay.
Something like that. If you continue to chat, I will endeavor to figure out how to put the pattern up so people can look at it. How about that?
We'll do that. So, we get asked this quite a bit, and so I thought we would both take our own unique perspectives, and Stu and I do see it a little differently as on how we get ready for it, and both have had some success doing it that way. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. I'm sure both of us think that since we're never wrong, that probably our way works best. And so but you'll get an idea of a couple of different ways that we approach how to get ready for any particular pattern. My particular system, it doesn't really change. My core 6 balls don't really change a lot, and I'll add in some pieces on the fringes depending on what we're going to bowl on or not bowl on. 44 feet, not as likely to use urethane, but we're in a place where urethane has worked a lot, and so I might actually throw that in as an additional 5%er, and meaning about a 5% chance I'd actually use it. I think Stu does have the pattern up now.
Yeah. So I can zoom in on it a little bit, but as you can see, the pattern's actually just let me if I scroll down a little bit. So the pattern's actually quite built up around the outside part of the lane. So I'm sure Chris will be trying the extreme outside part of the lane early on.
Hi. Bye.
Bye, Linda.
Bye.
Last show in the house.
So far, so good.
We signed this morning, so this will be the last show from the Caruth Estates version of the Beef and Barnzy show.
Sad but happy.
Yep. See you later.
Yes. I sent her to work. I've become accustomed to a certain form of living standard, and so she has to go maintain that for us.
Yeah. I actually laid this pattern out the other night at the bowling center, just to get a little idea to see which part of the lane would play or whatever, because it's obviously going to be different everywhere you go. I actually found it to be a little bit too dry around 5 for me.
Just staying on top of it?
Yeah, I couldn't really create a spot where it would stop. And it wasn't like, it's still 44 feet, so it's not like you can peel it back off one, like throwing dead at it. So
on that picture from further away, it looks like there's no oil on the first 5 boards. Is that the way that is?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. It, like I say, the pattern's really got its big jump around 7.
And so, knowing that, obviously that's one of the reasons why this ball, which like a heavy control ball, and I've talked about it before, where I use basically 6 balls as a base: a heavy control, heavy angular, medium control, medium angular, and then I get down to a dry angular ball, and then a dry control ball, which this will kind of fit into that range as well. And on 44 feet, most of the time this ball doesn't really come into play that much because it won't hook enough down lane. But that's why I bring it. In the event that gutter plays like that, this ball, which has had a ton of success at Shawnee, will definitely be going, as well as probably an aspect with some surface on it as well. Another low RG symmetrical ball. So You never really know, but I'm going to have multiple strategies, I guess, on how I might be able to play it. We'll get a look at them a little bit in practice session where the gutter normally hooks way more than it does once the tournament starts. And so we'll have one look out there for just in case. And then, but on 44 feet, rule of 31, exiting the end of the pattern, give or take 12 or 13, which is more likely to be closer to 10. You're going to have a place to play in there in the event the gutter goes away, which is on 44 feet is pretty likely most of the time, either from right off the get-go first game, or at least towards the end of a block.
Yeah. So just a couple of things. King Lesko says that's because you have too much hands, Stu. Throw it like an old guy, and you can play up 5 on Fire Lake on this. So.
What Keith means is as his version of an old guy, he can only play at 5.
And I've never seen him play 5.
That's actually true. He actually doesn't play 5.
He plays 8.
It takes all the fun out of the joke, though, if he doesn't actually do it.
I was actually doing a video last week on my RSTX one where I actually could play pretty close to 5. And so I did the video because I never get to play that part of the lane. Like, I never find a pattern I could play that part of the lane.
Right.
And then later on, I'd obviously burn it up and I could throw the proton physics like 15 to like 5. And I was going to do a video for Instagram, which is, which first arrow bowler are you?
Yeah, there's the playing the gutter, and then there was what we used to call the Sean Rash playing the gutter, which was 10, and at some point getting it to the gutter.
Yeah.
Which
so
that was the West Malott playing the gutter.
So. We do have a couple of questions here, so this is good. It's that was Lesko. Donald says, on a longer pattern, I would use a lighter ball. I would think he's talking about a cleaner ball and stay right of everyone else. Beef, would it be possible you could explain the reason why a lighter friction ball would be a good choice? Yes, because on longer patterns, quite often, they don't really use any more oil. So if you imagine the oil is like stretched more across the lane and like longer down the lane. So the oil is very thin. So if you use a strong ball, it'll pick up in the front and then it'll burn up and it'll lose all of its energy. So when it gets towards the further down the lane, it's still in oil, but it's burnt up. So then it won't hook. Whereas if you take a cleaner ball, it won't lose energy in the front part. So it's still got a little bit of its motion left for when it finally gets out of the oil. So in layman's terms, that's why sometimes those balls work quite well. Not always, but sometimes.
Well, and they're very dependent on one thing, is you have to be really good on long patterns most of the time, you have to have really good speed control. If you throw it too hard, it really doesn't matter what your rev rate is. I tell the story all the time. Tommy Jones, at the beginning of that career, when he was winning 10 times in 2 years, basically 2.5 years, he won them all in the first 4 patterns. The shark pattern, he barely ever got a check because even though he had, and certainly in the highest rev rates on tour, his ball speed was so high, his ball would never make the corner on the shark pattern. And so guys like Pat Healy and or Duke and the guys that have touch and those kind of things. But Pete always bowled great on that. Tim Chris back then. But guys who were with a lot of axis rotation, Fagan, West Malott, they bowled way better on that than Tommy did. Now, Tommy beat the rest of us on most everything else there. But if you can have great speed control, then you can use those faster response balls that don't lose so much energy in the front lane.
Yeah, I think that the thing that's become very evident the last probably last 4 or 5 years, maybe even a little bit longer, has been on a lot of the designed PBA long patterns, the lower rev rate guys actually do really good, which people think doesn't make sense. But the reason being is they've just got way better launch angle control, and they can do the easiest thing, which is keep it dead on the head pin.
Yeah.
They don't have to like give the head pin away at all. So I've done really well on Badger, which is 52 feet, because my rev rate matches up really good to that pattern because I can just lay it on the head pin, and I'm really good at that. You know, you move your eyes one left, then you chase your feet, eyes left, chase your feet, just keeping it on the oil and just fading it almost into the pocket.
Yeah.
The problem I get is when I get in those sort of like 45-foot patterns sometimes, I can't do that because there's too much hook.
Right.
But I also don't have enough rev rate to do what the high rev rate guys do, which is open up and kind of give the 3-pin away and get it to shape back. So I get into that no man's land where I can book it or 4 count. So
that's not good. No.
And like I say, that's just one of those things where, like, Michael Haugen, for example, did really well. I think he might have won the long pattern at the World Series. I think he beat Martin in the final. I think that was Shark. Or it might have been like when they turned Scorpion into Shark. Who knows?
Yeah, longish pattern.
But that was really long, and Haugen would be the last person you'd think would do well when there was a lot of oil.
Yeah.
But he was able to keep the ball dead in front of him, and he didn't miss the pocket. So that's definitely one of those things where it's like sometimes you see the high rev rate guys winning on Cheetah and the lower rev rate guys winning on Shark, and for a lot of people that doesn't really make that much sense.
Yeah, Lawrence Marquez has a good question there. You pull that up.
Yeah.
But he's talking about older surfaces and using weaker layouts. But it also goes to Stu's point of, yes, I mean, nobody's really put a new surface in 5 years. And so if you go to places that have a fair amount of league, these centers are starting to get a little scratched up. And a lot of surfaces are 10 and 15 years old now that we used to think of as fairly new, but they're really not. And Stu made this point and actually brought it to my attention that how much friction there is in the front part of the lane, it seems like every week, despite the oil's getting thicker and thicker, and we're actually starting to put more volume on the lane. And so, yes, I think we are using a little bit cleaner balls for the guys like Stu and I who have to throw it a little slower to get it to hook the same amount as the guys with higher rev rates. The other thing, that plays into those long patterns because there's more friction in the track. So there's something for the straighter guys to bump up against. The misnomer is when they're really hard that the straight players are good. Really, the straight players are best when there is some friction to the right because they have something to play off of, and then they can stay to the right. If there's no friction there, then you're just playing fallback, and then you're not going to keep up with the EJ Tackett's and the Belmontes of the world.
Rachel asked a question here. She says, didn't see you bowl on Sunday at Astro, but being a lower rev rate bowler as well. How would you attack the 40-foot pattern? Well, I actually was one of the higher rev rates in the field this week, so that was nice. What I did was I tried to start off with urethane playing way to the right, and it actually looked really good, but it was really inconsistent going across the bowling center. So the second game, I kind of made an ass out of myself when I thought that, oh my God, I'm going to lead this thing. I shot 235, I think it was the first game, and I missed a spare in the ninth. I had 290 running going into the eighth frame, so it was a bit of a disappointing finish to that game. Anyway, moves to the next pair. The urethane was it wasn't very good. Then I moved, and I jumped into about 15 and really started to try and get the ball to pick up early with that new Rotogrip X1, and just kind of soft curved it after that. And I just chased it in as I went, and depending on whether I was following, because we did a alternate skip, but basically one game I followed Ray and he was using urethane, and then the other game I followed Ferro. So it was kind of like just judging how much further left I had to be on Ferro's lanes. And then by the end I was probably at 25, just trying to keep finding the hold, kind of playing the same shape but just moving it further left as I went. So that's kind of the thing I did. And then on Sunday, kind of the same thing. Early on, I used the reactive ball and just kept it dead in front of me around 10. And then as the oil, burnt up a little bit, and I just chased it in. So that's pretty much the options I went with. I think that was pretty kind of similar to what Maldonado did. Simonson just decided that he was going to do the Belmo thing. It was a match. So he just used urethane, because asked Diana how that felt by the end.
the first game was great, but not so much.
Yeah,
the second game, which
the 140 after that was a little rough. Here's two of my crossing mates, Donald Cooper, a young two-handed kid, up and comer in the Texas area, South Texas for sure. Justin, hey, how's it going? Hey, Ads, what do I think of the new proton physics? Yeah, the color's very cool. It's very vibrant, but man, that ball hooks a lot. Wow, lots of hook. We had another quick question. Matt Stevens, when playing the outside part of the lane, do you prefer to use short pin versus urethane? I don't like using short pin balls at all. Chris uses them a little more than I do, but I just find that they read the back part of the lane way too much, the oil down lane way too much. So for me, they're not really in play for long enough to really warrant the advantage of using them. Talking about short pin layouts.
Yeah, definitely to play to the right. And I prefer those short pins and play when I'm using reactive, but slow reactive. Big covers, lots of surface, low RGs, and shorter pins. But once you move in, those don't make the corner enough. Generally, unless they're a really fast ball, like the White Badger.
I just feel like the only reason to use a short pin ball over a urethane is if the front part of the lane is drier and you can't really get the urethane through that very first part of the lane. Then I can see that the short pin ball can be some use. But most of the time, the whole field's going to be using urethane. So, and the thing for me that really handicaps the short pin balls is once the oil really gets down the lane, the carry becomes really difficult. Right. Well, if the field's using urethane, then that makes that window to use the short pin ball even smaller than normal. So that's where I struggle with the short pin balls. It's not that they're a bad idea. It's just that the window of use is too short.
Yeah, if you're a more speed dominant player, that obviously changes a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because you're a player that maybe where urethane doesn't look that good for you, doesn't go to the pins well, then those layouts become much more useful for you. And if you're a player that has a lot of axis rotation, so you can keep that lower pin to keep going, then those lower short pins will also come into play much more for you than they do. Stu can make the ball roll pretty early when he wants to. He can get it down there. Obviously, mostly I get the ball roll early, not as much length. That's certainly the hardest thing for me to do. And so using them to create that urethane type motion, so in my opinion, that's like what a lower rev rate player feels like the rest of the time. When I'm on tour, that's how I feel out there. So I use more of those than I do urethane.
We had a question that I can't really find now, but somebody was saying, did we anticipate us changing brands? Speaking for myself, no, I don't anticipate me changing brands. I really hope not. I just redid the shelving in my garage, so I moved all the balls that I hadn't drilled around, so that would be really inconvenient if I was forced to change brand, but I don't think that's going to be the case.
I just got a whole bunch of shirts from Kulik.
Yeah.
So, not planning on moving those around any. And, we have not officially signed, but there's every intention to do so. So, not planning on changing brands.
So that leads me into the next question. Casey Mattingly, a pro shop operator and a 300 machine at the minute. So have you got any thoughts on drilling any of the other Utah brands here soon?
There's been an official announcement. So yes, I believe we'll be trying to get a little more familiar with some of the other balls out there.
Yeah,
I've been
we're trading notes.
It's always nice to have options.
Like I say, Chris, we're trading notes.
Yes. Yeah, basically, I actually did literally that yesterday. I asked Stu about a couple of balls and his opinions on what they are. I think we see a lot of shapes in some similar ways. We go about them. We get there differently, but we do see ball motion very similarly. And I think
we just use the balls to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so.
I'm. If I was to speak in specifics, I'm quite looking forward to trying out the Zen and the Volatility Torque. They're the two that I'd had an eyeball on. I think that there's so much crossover with some of the other pieces that, I mean, I'm pretty happy with what I've got right now. I was actually laughing with Frankie about this the other day. I said, I don't know whether all the balls suddenly got way better or the more likely scenario is I'm not pulling like an asshole.
Well, I mean, based on the fact that you keep striking every week with that RST X1 4-362A, I will probably try that when that time comes around. And certainly, there's balls that have been great for a long time with the phase twos and idles and things like that. So, but like I said, the Zen that's gone crazy, and that's kind of in that middle of the road, middle lineup thing, like a phase two has been for a while. So, yeah, I think it's always great to have options because on the tour, the slivers make a pretty big difference some weeks, and so having those small gaps help out probably much more than they do when say we're going in local and those kind of things where you're trying to fill bigger areas in general and just make sure you're covered.
Cannon says, as a high axis rotation player, I use short pins over urethane all the time. Okay.
If you're a high axis rotation player and a lower rev rate, I can certainly see that. But urethane is one of the best ways to control the lane. So if you can get the ball to go through the pins, what's getting proved over and over is that the moves are smaller. So you have less transition in general, and it blends out patterns. In general, it makes what used to look relatively hard look pretty soft because it does cover up the small mistakes that when the lanes are on the difficult size, it blends those things out and kind of covers up small speed mistakes or small rotation mistakes that become very obvious with responsive bowling balls.
Yeah. So in regards to my arsenal, I'm going in a similar vein to Chris. I drive a truck, so my 6 is actually 22. But some of the balls that I'd be taking, like the ones that I definitely take for sure, the X1, that's pretty much the staple right now. I seem to be able to use it on everything. I've got a down layout on an Omega Crux and a Proton Physics that I quite like. Kind of similar layout, kind of a 45-degree layout, 5-inch pin, type of 70-degree val angle. And then, of course, balls like the phase 2 obviously going to be going. I actually don't have an idle right now, and that might be this afternoon's project. But the 2 urethanes I have at the minute are the Fast Pitch and the Pitch Purple. I don't have a Pitch Black because I left it in Virginia on the truck. And
you did the same thing with the Booyah.
And the thing is for the things that we're bowling right now, I just don't need 3 urethane balls. And yes, I think that the Pitch Black, for me, the Pitch Black's the one that's the earliest. And it was quite strange because I spoke to Rambo Ray about it. And Rambo Ray said that he found the Pitch Black was the most responsive. Like it really was jerky.
Wow.
And then I started to think about the way he was describing it. And I kind of understood what he meant. Like the Pitch Black, flops over quite quickly and then is very this way.
Okay.
Whereas the Fast Pitch doesn't really do that. It's much more rounded shape the whole way. And I kind of, to start with, I was like, are you insane, dude? No, it's not. But I think it was just, he wasn't really necessarily using the correct terminology, but I could see what he meant. Like the pitch black definitely turns over quicker in the front part of the lane and then doesn't really shape. It's more of a hook stop. So yes, that's probably a better urethane reaction for me, but I'm able to use the fast pitch pretty good. And then the pitch purple seems to be too strong on almost every single thing I've bowled recently. So I'm a little bit like,
Wow.
it went from I couldn't make it hook to I stopped messing around. I drilled one with a 4-inch pin, and now she peels. And I need to get some oil onto it because, like, for example, I was using my pitch black in a tournament in Georgetown about 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I was controlling the pocket, and in the 10th frame, I threw the pitch purple and missed the head pin left.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There isn't any throwing that one slow for me. So, yeah, they're the type of balls I'm going to use. And then, obviously, the other ball that I really like at the minute is I have a Rubicon with a lot of surface to kind of play that, kind of trap it, that hook stop type reaction. And I've found that that's pretty good for me. I used it at the Weber Cup late on. So, yeah, those are the balls that I anticipate using. But as I drive a truck, I'm going to throw everything in the back, probably leave 10 to 12 of them in the truck for the entire weekend. But it's still nice knowing that they're there.
Yeah.
There's nothing more annoying than getting to a tournament, having a bunch of space in the back of the car and going, man, these are way more than I expected them to.
Why didn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't have any travel buddies. I just have my bowling balls.
There you go. Well, I could pick me up on the way, but I get it. It's fine. Yeah, for me, obviously the DCT is going to go because I've made 2 or 3 shows in that building with that ball. If the right plays, it really only plays from the right. It's so, that cover's so strong and smooth. And
sorry, Chris. Quick trivia. Is that still the first one you ever drilled?
I drilled another one, but it is the first one I ever drilled. That's still the first one. Billy Baru here is still. And just so you know, my favorite aspect still says for sample use, pending approval. And it is now approved, and I pre-approved it before that by a lot. I was a big fan. So I have added more surface though to separate that and the Zen away from each other.
I was about to say, all I'm learning from this is that you don't have a very good grasp of what you should do to add to your arsenal.
Oh yeah.
Well, no, because you just use it the first one, so I'm sure you drilled balls off it.
Oh, I do drill ones off of it, but once I like them, I don't really. I don't go. Oh, I'm going to drill another one and another one and another one. I don't do that. So once they roll good, they roll good.
Okay.
So aspect with some surface on it to kind of blend off of that. That's basically a hooking heavy control ball, something that'll have some more shape to it. The volatility torque that you were talking about, that's my heavy angular ball, shiny cover that's still really big engine in it. And then the Zen, which is that ball might be the hottest ball in the whole market right now. It's you're seeing them everywhere. Shiny, low RG, symmetrical, huge window of usability. And so that's been really good. I still have the 15-pound flux that's been good for a while, and it hasn't quite got replaced all the way. Revival with Honey Badger Revival would be around that. The C4 is a little bit smoother version of a benchmark. And then White Badger, a dry angular ball, and then
afterburner.
What's that?
That's your afterburner, yeah? Coming
yeah,
up.
And then the afterburner here. And that ball really gets around it. I doubt we'll see that in Shawnee between it being Brunswick Pro Ambulane, which typically plays very tight down lane and 44 feet. But if it turns out to be a version where they really hook in the front, I'll need a ball like that can get down, clear that front and save some energy. And then I'll have to be really good with speed control for it to make the corner.
So we got a couple of questions coming in. Ray says, are you going to get a pitch black?
I have booyahs that are.
Yeah, I mean, you've had pretty good success. Craig tells me I should use the pitch purple as a weak reactive. Hard to use it a weak reactive when it hooks more than all of my weak reactive balls. Matt Stevens says, this is probably one for me. Since we're going to be able to throw Storm, which is a better urethane to get since I don't have a Booyah or Badger infused, I think that the one that's if you want something that's closer to the Booyah, you probably want a pitch black. But overall, I would say that the one that I think is the most rounded for most people is the fast pitch. Like, I think that it shapes a little bit more traditionally, I suppose. Not traditional urethane, but more what people's eyes want to see. So you can just add more surface to it if you want it to hook sooner. So Ray then says, I wonder what Rash will roll from Storm. If we're going by experience, everything. He's certainly not afraid of a drill.
Yeah, drill press is his friend, and he sorts through them pretty well. And I thought it was shocking how quickly he went from Brunswick balls and then found balls that he really liked that fast.
Mm-hmm.
Made shows 2 out of the first 4 weeks, and then had a really nice year overall.
It shows how good the balls were.
I agree.
He didn't have to spend a whole time, trying to trick it.
It probably, and one of the things I have enjoyed more is having someone else who likes to roll it like that, because we have some guys really hook it, but Sloan and Lavery and Cooley and those guys, they really get around it way more than me. And so the balls we like don't always match up so well. Sean and I are probably a little closer as far as how we like to see the lane and how we play the lane. And so, he got to some of the right balls really fast and found some favorite ones. And some of them were ones that I didn't.
How much that makes a difference. I know that, I know it was a while ago, but when Dom left Storm, that made it, me and him had a pretty good, we could have pretty good conversations, and we spoke to each other obviously regularly about the balls. And it makes it a lot easier because, if you're not bowling so good, you might say, man, this ball sucks.
Yeah.
And dismiss a ball from your arsenal completely. And then because we have a bunch to choose from, it's very easy to just, put a ball in the doghouse and not want to bother with it again. But if you've got another guy who you trust, who you had a lot of conversation with, who sees the balls like you do, he can easily say to you, dude, that ball's great. Why are you not using it?
Right.
And that
I think we've all done that too. And with the global staff being considerably smaller than the Storm staff in the past, we've had balls that maybe looked bad in a particular center, and they just kind of got dismissed completely. And it took a while for us to circle back around to them, and so we missed out probably on a few weeks of, or several weeks of a really good ball. And so I am looking forward to that, with having an enormous number of people that'll have a chance to throw the balls. And if they're the right ball, you won't miss, and it'll make it a lot easier for myself and Sean and Anthony and those guys to get to the right balls on the other side. Because you look around and you go, what's that blue and red thing everybody's throwing? Oh, phase 2. Okay. Probably better look into that one.
Peter Potter says, I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to say to this. What would you recommend my first 900 global ball being now we have access to them? Yep, Zen.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many of these balls. I was at the youth tournament on Saturday, and they said they drilled 16 in that center, in that pro shop on Saturday. And, considering all the great balls that are out there, that's a pretty big endorsement, and it certainly doesn't hurt that it's in the same Storm demo sets with the Storm and Roto balls at the same time, which obviously attracts a lot of people.
Which, to be fair, has a positive and a negative effect, because if it isn't up to snuff,
right,
people see pretty quickly. So that's a positive. Jimmy says, do you use the Shorelock thumb and all? Chris uses the It, and I use the switch grip.
Mm-hmm.
So It makes life a lot easier when you're a ball whore like myself.
And even for me, it's still way easier to just drill balls than, I do a lot of them. I have like 6 or 8 thumbs, but then I have them for, 2 years at a time versus the 40 or 50 balls you have to drill a year.
Justin says, even though I highly dislike urethane, should I bite the bullet and drill one to keep me out of trouble sometimes? Yes. You might have to look around to figure out which one you want to drill, but yes. If you're a tournament player, pretty much everybody should have a urethane ball right now.
Yeah, it gets really tricky when there's a tipping point in the field when you get to, say, 30% of the field starts using them. There ends up being so much more carry down on the lane that if you're not using one, you better be using a really, really slow reactive with some tricks. The ability to really get up the back of it. Otherwise, you're just going to see wiggle all the time. And urethane is really the only way around that. Korea taught us that 15 years ago, and now it's full blown on the tour now with the rev rates and just getting to where they like to start with it because it does make it easier to hit the pocket.
Yeah, I remember the first time I really saw it be like really the most awful thing to ever bowl on was the World Championships when they're in Vegas, when the 4 Koreans made the top 8. And they had a rule at the World Championships where you have to bowl your countrymen first so that there's no throwing off at the end, which theoretically seems like is a really good rule until 4 Koreans make it all using urethane. And then they say, okay, you 4 guys have to bowl each other for the first 3 games. So they managed to destroy every single pair in the place. And I'll still never forget Amleto changing lanes, throwing his ball, turning around and screaming, "What the fuck, man?" As his ball nailed 3 off the right.
Yeah, on a short pattern. 30 fish fighter. Yeah, I was in that final. I won all events by a lot, and I was lucky to hang on in that match play.
Well, you were the only one who was really prepared for it. You had the EPX at the time,
right.
And
I
you
had a urethane ball.
Like you were able to kind of do kind of the shape that they were doing, albeit
they made it messy.
Right.
That's for sure.
But the guys with reactives were just, they might as well have gone home.
They had no chance.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and especially on the pairs that the Koreans started on.
Yeah.
It was
those 2 pairs that they started on were awful compared to, I mean, they were arrows tighter.
Yeah, it was. I remember Martin, because you could hit your ball in between games there, and Martin's coach like looked like he took a bandsaw to his ball with like 500. He was like across it, and Martin threw it, and he goes, "Well, where should I stand with this one?" And the guy said, "I'd still move a couple right," and he's still 2-pin. The entire 4 non-Koreans when they changed lanes all left the 2-pin the first shot, even Chris, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah, you knew it going in, and I was standing on top of the gutter. I wasn't even crossing it or trying to hook it down lane. And they got me in the final where they snowballed a spot, and I literally just couldn't get it up the hill from outside of it, and they blew up the spot left of it. It was one of the few times on the international side. Obviously, you get out-strategized every once in a while on tour.
Yeah.
But one of the few times that they had a plan, and it was really good. And I knew it and still couldn't beat it, which was...
Yeah. It was a bit like that time when Duke kept telling everybody. He didn't need to tell them. You knew he was going to play 8 no matter what the pattern was. He just kept beating everybody doing it.
Yeah, no doubt.
Here's one. Guys, how important, in your opinion, is plastic for shooting spares? I use urethane, but I've been told to use plastic. Well, for me, I am a really big guy for using plastic. I almost think that there's nobody in the world who doesn't get better by using a plastic ball for their spare shots. I always used to have the joke that there was 2. Norm Duke, because he basically never misses. And Oscar, because his ball goes so fast that it just doesn't make any difference. If it doesn't touch the line, I said, but everybody in between those two guys, it just, and especially now with urethane, if you want to use your urethane ball, you're going to have more surface on it. So when you're like trying to go across lane, especially on some of the like drier patterns, I mean,
if you have rotation at all, I would say 100%. You know, if I'm on tour, I definitely have one. If I'm bowling a tournament where I can take as many as I want, I definitely have a plastic ball. And the one exception will be if I'm in a 6-ball thing where urethane is in play. I try and take a ball that I can use both ways. But I do know that I'm a better spare shooter with plastic than without. And by using urethane or a weak reactive short pin, as everybody's referred to in here, then it's going to tip every once in a while, and you're going to take a chance of chopping a 3-6 or a 6-10 somewhere. And so you have to know going in that you may cost yourself 10 or 20 pins there. Is that ball going to be worth it on what you're bowling on?
Yeah, and the other thing that I found was I virtually never used the ball that I ended up throwing at spares. So I ended up taking a weaker ball to throw to use like straight. But then I virtually never used it. So it became like completely pointless. I mean, I know I'm going to use the spare ball. I know it's going to match up on whatever we bowl on. Like, I'm going to leave the 10 pin. That's for sure. So, yeah, here's a blast from the past. Oscar Brostrom. He says, hey, guys, great show, and I've learned a lot because I started bowling after 10 years. Well, I guess your face is just about recovered from the amount of times you used to punch yourself when you got pissed off. Yeah, it's good to have you back, Oscar. Now, Oscar had a high rev rate. He didn't mess around.
Yeah.
He also one time did knock himself out.
Well, I can't really judge. So, I know I kept my punches to myself below the belt, but,
with urethane in play, how many urethane balls do you tend to carry in your tournament arsenal? No, didn't you have the up and down one? I thought you had a couple this season when you were bowling.
Yeah, the second one never really came into play. So I ended up being one. But to be fair, the way I use like this DCT is effectively urethane. It's the only, it's only good from right of, 12 is a real stretch, really right of second arrow. So, yeah, my heavy control ball basically is a version of urethane. And then most of the time, if it's a 6-ball thing, that urethane ball at the bottom also becomes a urethane-ish ball.
Yeah, for me, it's 2 or 3. Like, I don't feel like I have as many tricks with the urethane balls as Chris does. Like, he's able to really continue to make them hook. So for me, I try to focus on being able to use them 1 or 2 ways and then hope that having another option is enough for the carry. Because if I'm not hitting the pocket with urethane, I'm just going to put it away.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the thing that's frustrating with urethane is when you're controlling the pocket, but you can't get the 10 pin out or you're 4 pinning all the time.
Right.
And for me, I don't feel like I have enough experience of understanding the things I need to do with that one ball. So having like a fast pitch off a pitch black or whatever is, or even another pitch black is kind of the way I tend to go. Casey, since we're on the urethane chat, what are your opinions on the hot cell? Wasn't a fan at all. Didn't really see many people have success with that one. Ironically, the only person I did see have reasonably success with that one was Sean Maldonado. Oscar says, which balls would you, for a 4-ball bag for an old fart trying to take up bowling after some years? Pitch black idle or a phase 2 would be the ball I would pick in the middle, and it really doesn't matter. I would take, from a storm point of view, I would take a high road pearl, an idle, and then something stronger like either proton physics or Omega Crux. And then depending on whether you were super speed strong, I'd take something weaker like an Afterburner or a Hustle. So that would be a kind of a 4 that I would go with. So you had something that was kind of strong. The idle phase 2 would be the ball that you could pretty much use on everything. And then off the idle, I'd move to a high road pull because I still think that's the best one for going around the lane. And then having that weaker ball just in case. In Sweden, you guys don't really need to worry too much because you don't have a lot of bad surfaces. A lot of Sweden adopted synthetic lanes a little later.
Mm-hmm.
So they went from wood into synthetic, and their wood was in better condition for longer. So, yeah, I don't bump into many bad surfaces in Sweden. So, I don't know what that question depends on. I guess this is how many urethanes you have. I'm not sure about that one. Travis says, what's your opinion of the aspect?
I like that ball a lot, and actually, it did tend to shine up kind of quick, and so I was letting it be shiny so it could be more of a benchmark. Middle of the Arsenal ball, but with the Zen coming in there, I've added more surface to it and moved it up as more of a heavy, a heavy type control ball, and it has a pretty long continuation window too. But if there's one fault that it had is that it could be a little bit early, and so by putting surface on it now, I'm not tempted to use it when the front, unless the front has got more oil on it and it covers that zone for me way better. So big fan. I've used it a bunch so far, and again, it has that big window of continuation, so I can use it on a lot of different kind of patterns.
Casey says, are your urethane layouts different than your typical reactive layouts? For me, yes. I drill the pins a lot stronger, almost an inch stronger, to be honest. And I've been using kind of similar pin buffers that I've used on some of the pin-up balls. I don't really use pin-down balls in urethane for me.
So I've gone the opposite way, where I did drill them stronger for a while, but then they hooked so early for me that they just made me go too far left or right. So I started going back to very similar drillings, maybe a ½ inch stronger than my weakest drilling, and then just using way more surface on them, because it actually, even as much as 360, because while it looks like a snowball, it actually didn't make it pick up that much sooner. And by controlling the flare, I could still stay up the lane. It just grabbed the middle of the lane better for me to go at it that way.
I think we actually flipped, because I was using weaker ones. But then for me, when I do really good, I use a weaker one, but I can't use a weaker one to create the shape that everybody's using urethane for.
Right.
So when I just want to keep it dead in front of me and just keep creating more and more and more and more hold,
yeah,
that's when I've done really good with urethane, but you're so infrequent to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's still a niche product for me in general when I'm bowling around the higher rev rates.
He says, should a lower rev player have a urethane for some sort of sport challenge patterns we see? I think so. But
is that Lesko?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the running joke is that he has a whole bag full of them. So
he's a hand urethane.
Well, and Mexican urethane. So
with a lot of bowling centers closing again, why do ball companies still continue to?
But to answer Keith's question, honestly, like a lot between the SASBAs and league patterns and some of the stuff that's a little softer, I don't know that you really need one so much other than to blend it out a little bit. And I think some of the newer ones, like you're talking about, the fast pitch purple, some of those that actually shape a little bit more, those can be a blend off of that. And I think Brunswick makes one that has kind of that, has some reactive in it or whatever, so it has a little bit more responsiveness to it to let it shape.
Eric says, I feel like the high road pearl has been on a lot of shows, wondering why I'm seeing it much more. Because surfaces are bad.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And then what happens a lot on the PBA tour is one person has an idea and it works, and then we all follow.
Yeah, the tour and the NFL defenses aren't really all that much different. It's just kind of.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll all do that now.
What storm ball does the Zen compare to, if any? I would think probably something along the lines of a phase 3, because the Axiom Pearl, I think, is a bit earlier than the Zen. So
Watching from afar, it seems like it's in between phase 2 and idle. Is kind of where I had it put at, but I haven't thrown those two, so it makes it pretty.
I felt like the Zen was quite angular.
Well, it's not when I throw it, but that's not really a fair. It does seem stronger, and it is low RG. The number-wise, it compares similarly to, like say, the Axiom numbers, the phase 2 and idle numbers. They're all low RG, fairly high diff balls, and so it's kind of hard to say exactly. But I haven't thrown them up against each other.
It just feels like that ball's quite skid and like it hooks quite a bit. Like for me, that ball looks quite angular.
Okay.
And like I think that the Axiom core ends up being a little bit more forward.
Okay.
Whereas the phase 3 is like, if it doesn't have enough oil, it gets forward, but it's quite quick. And I thought, from what I'd seen of the Zen, I felt like it was quite quick. Looking at Anthony throwing it and you throwing it, like now you might have added more surface to try and use it slightly differently, but I just felt when I
for me, I used it out of the box, which had a lot of polish on it out of the box, and then even where I bowl at league at, there's quite a bit of oil down lane, and so I just lightly dusted that off and felt like it rolled through a little better. I strive to see controlling shapes anyway, and so. Even though it's way more angular than it's more angular than the aspect was from that standpoint as far as longer and getting to it, I still try and use it as a more controlled shape. I can certainly see players like Anthony can make it do circles and Dimitri and those guys. So.
I see the aspect as being really close to the idle phase 2s.
Okay.
That's more where I see that ball being. Somebody just asked a reasonable question and I've lost it. I think it was, how do I compare there it is. How do I compare High Road Pearl to phase 3? Well, the problem is the gap isn't that big for me, but I throw 16 and most of the rest of the world throws 15. And in 15, the gap's gargantuan.
Yeah.
Because the phase 3 is much stronger cover, but in 15, the weight block is actually stronger in the High Road Pearl than it is in the phase 3. The RGs are really similar, and the diff is much higher. It's almost 20% higher, I think, in the High Road Pearl. So for me personally, I actually have the High Road Pearl a little smoother. I can't really use it. I have to lose a little surface on the High Road Pearl because of the way it is with the weight block. But if I was to use a 15-pound ball, that would be like probably the most skid snap ball we had in the Storm Roto family. So
the 15-pound High Road?
Yeah, 15-pound High Road Pearl, yeah.
Yeah. You sure see a lot of that one.
Yeah, I like I say, and if you don't really like it shiny, I feel like if you just add a little surface to it, it's good. For me,
this afterburner too, it's really long. It comes with a lot of polish. Once you take a little bit of that polish off, it becomes much stronger overall, and then becomes a really aggressive dry angular ball.
Yeah, I mean that the High Road Pearl might be the one ball that I actually cursed the balance hole rule for, because that was the only ball I think that I used the balance hole in. Just to kind of take a little bit of the diff out of it. I put the hole right on my axis just to try and take a little bit of the diff out, because it's, I don't know. All right, well, we've got round to 11 o'clock already. It never ceases to amaze me how much bullshit me and you can talk.
Yeah, I thought this was going to be a quick one, 25 minutes. We'd be, people wouldn't, and but we had the best fans of bowling, and I think it's fair to not just have some background stuff, but answer the questions you really want answered sometimes. And so I appreciate all the questions. And I mean, there's still some coming in, but
yeah, Love Jones just asked me, have you considered changing to 15 pounds since you haven't won much in 16? I did actually change to 15, and then I realized that 16 was definitely the answer.
Yeah, in general, I'm still a 16 as well, as I've gotten a little more experienced, as it's been brought up to my attention. I've considered some 15s and experimented for a minute and actually liked a few of them. And so I have some angular balls in 15, but certainly when I'm playing straighter or on heavier, where there's less traction on the lane, I like the extra weight. And so I'm actually bouncing back and forth a little bit, and I kind of like it that way. It creates more differences for me too.
We got one more I think it's a really good question, so this is definitely going to be the last one. Michael Fitzgerald says, which is more important, choosing an arsenal for traveling, cover stocks or cores? For me, cover stock, because in my experience with the balls, I've been with Storm for a long time, and Storm's covers are way more dominant than Storm's cores, whereas with Ebonite, when they were around,
way more the other way.
It was the opposite way, and Chris came from that mindset. So I think that talking to him, it took you a little while to get out of like 100% looking at that number.
Yeah. There's more differentiation in the global, and I'm assuming that will carry forward with the Utah lines as well. There's more differentiation in covers between weakest to strongest than there was before for me. That being said, Stu's spot on, really, because cover stocks are, I would say, on average 60%, because it does touch the lane, and cores are 20%. But I do try and marry them.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm taking 6 balls, I'm at 500,000, 2,000, 2,000 polish, 4,000 or 4,000 polish, and kind of step them off each other all the way through. And with the RGs going from lowest on the most surface to higher as you go up to balls that you're trying to get longer, and try and make the balls work together to separate them out more. And that way you don't have to worry nearly so much about drillings. You can use your favorite drillings. And with cover stocks, surfaces, and cores, you can separate those out pretty easy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that I've definitely embraced a little bit, talking to you and Sean Ryan a little bit more. I've definitely started to look at the cores a little bit more. I was very much into I just looked at what my eyes saw, and sometimes that was fine. But then if you're in a bowling center where a certain thing rolls good, like your brain can be a little twisted from what you see rather than what's actually happening. So, okay, well, we appreciate it. I'm not sure if we're going to have a show on Tuesday yet. I'm leaning towards probably not, but we'll try and maybe we will record something on Monday and put that up on YouTube on Tuesday.
Maybe we'll Tuesday is moving day.
Yeah. So. And for all you guys who have moved, you know how much it sucks. So, yeah, hopefully.
It sounds like a pretty good idea till right about now.
I was about to say, ask Pat McAfee would say, T's and P's for Chris's back. So, yeah, I've got to mention the board quite quickly. All I want for Christmas is a Beef and Barnzy shirt. Get on Tinternet. Check out beefandbarnzy.com. Oh, banners. There it is. Oh, our banners have disappeared, Chris.
Really?
Oh, no, there they are.
Oh.
There we go. So that's
normally the one contribution I make to the show. So,
yeah, there we go. I was so dismissive.
Yeah, I know.
I'll quickly bring up this one for you, and you can show us out. Oh, one other thing. I'm on my soapbox now. The Moscone Cup's on, the pool version of the Weber Cup. it's amazing. The entire pool world, whether they're involved in it or not, whether they're from a country that could be involved in it or not, embraces it. Can we get more of that in the bowling world, please?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we are responsible for our own success and or demise, and if we don't get a little bit more together, some of these bowling centers are going to go away. Some of the tours and the things around the world are going to go away, and it's admirable how much that community does pull together. In the fact that it feels like it's a little disrespected, and you know, darts kind of did the same thing, and they pulled themselves up above, man, a lot of things. It's one of them. It's actually fun to watch, and it's all because of the crowd.
100%.
Yeah, darts. It's amazing skill, but it's the crowd that makes that thing fun, and that's what we need to have in bowling. Obviously, can't do it right now, but that's really the Portland, Maine thing. That makes watching bowling way more fun, and we need that to spread.
All right, Chris.
So
do as your rundown.
All right. Well, with that, if you would, please, once again, support our sponsors who support us. Storm, Rotogrip, 900 Global, Turbo, Vice, 3G Shoes, Coolwick, Bowler Smart, and Master Products. Of course, there's room for your product at the end of that. And once again, support those small bowling centers. Help them get open where they can, and help them get through this tough time. They're going to need it to get through the summer later on this year. So. But until then, stay safe, stay healthy. God bless.
See you later.